Hi, my name is Melanie Davidson. I'm a mechanical engineering student at Rutgers, and I help run the solar decathlon team on the engineering campus.
Hi, my name is Gary Lam, and I'm an electrical engineer, and also I'm in charge of the electrical parts like the solar panels and all the power load calculation in this solar decathlon.
So tell me a little bit about this panel behind you.
Okay. So we're in New Jersey, in Franklin Township, which is right by Rutgers University, and the panel behind us is part of a statewide program to increase the amount of solar energy that our state produces and that people consume. So right now, utility companies have to buy solar energy, and because New Jersey is really limited in its real estate, we can't just put huge arrays of solar farms anywhere. We don't have enough land. So the alternative to that has been what you see behind you, and that is that there are Petra Solar PV panels placed on utility poles all over the state. So much so that together they make many megawatts of power.
Could you explain a little bit more about what a PV panel is and sort of how it works?
Yes, a PV panel usually take the sunlight and then it will convert it into direct current power, DC current. But for the Petra solar panels, they can output AC current directly. And why is that? It's because they have a smart module integrated into the PV panel, which is able to do the DC to AC conversions and monitoring and also communications.
And it's all in one panel. So most of the time, if you have a large solar array, you have lots of wires running everywhere, and every wire from the panel carries DC energy and then puts it into one large, what is called an inverter at the end that makes it into AC. But with Petra Solar, it's all built in, so actually you can modulate the size of your array. So say I lived in a residence in New Jersey, and I could only afford maybe to buy 5 panels, but then in a few years I decide, hey, I really like solar energy, I like all of the tax breaks I'm getting, I'm going to increase it. You don't even have to redesign your system. You basically just go up to your roof and put some more panels on there. So it's a cheaper, it's actually a safer way of putting up solar panels.
So could one of these PV panels actually power this whole block?
Okay, sure. So this one PV panel definitely can't power this whole block. That PV panel has about a 210 watt output. So 210 watts, that's actually not that many if you think about it. If you have a CFL bulb, those are one of those new light bulbs. Say that it's a 40 watt bulb. So maybe you could get 5 light bulbs being powered from this one panel, which is why our house, the solar panel, or the solar Team New Jersey house that we're building in Washington, D.C. is actually going to have 40 of those panels, bringing our total kilowatt to 8.4 kilowatts. And 8.4 kilowatts is enough to power an energy efficient house, but just one panel alone won't do it. And that actually brings us to another point of why this panel is connected to the grid and sitting on a utility pole. Because solar panels, first of all, only produce power when the sun is shining. So right now we have a clear, beautiful, sunny day. So this panel here is probably putting out a full output. So it's putting out its full 210 watts. However, if it was cloudy or at night, it's not putting out any power. That's why it's connected to the grid. When it's sunny out, it'll feed into the grid, and when it's cloudy, the grid will just leave it alone. So basically it's a power producer, but there's no storage. The grid itself is the electrical storage.
And could you explain how that relates to our house?
Sure.
Yes, since our house, we are trying to make it to be a new generations of greenhouse. About the old solar technology, they are more likely care about the house itself. But so it will generate power. Maybe you have a battery backup, then it will store energy at your house. But with these new panels, they are more closely working with the service provider, like PSENG. So what they do is they will generate power during the day, and if you consume any, then it will go into your house. But if you cannot consume all of them, it will go back to the grid and feed into the utility company's network. Then you get payback for what you're paying for. and you don't need a storage, which is a very expensive solution.
This is called net metering. So basically net metering is an alternative to battery storage in a solar house. So if you're in a solar house in New Mexico, say, out in the desert, and there's no access to the grid, no power lines, you might want to invest in battery backup, because the solar energy your house produces during the day that you do not use, you can then draw upon at night. However, batteries, the technology isn't very good, they're really expensive, and actually they have all kinds of icky heavy metals that are difficult to dispose of safely. So in the solar decathlon competition, there's no battery backup allowed, and we think that's a really good policy, especially because you have the ability to feed into the grid with your power. And this is also what's called net metering. And the way the net metering program works, like Gary was saying, is say our house has 8.2 kilowatts on our roof. If at any given time on a sunny day we're only drawing 5 kilowatts of power, that means that 3.2 kilowatts that we're producing will actually be sent to the grid, and other houses will be using our solar energy too. And then at night, when we're not producing any, we'll just pull from the grid. And the energy from the grid is coming from more traditional power sources like nuclear power, coal, and natural gas. And we're actually really excited to also be working with our sponsor, PSE&G. They buy many, many kilowatts over of solar power every year from houses, commercial businesses, and use that as part of their power portfolio and power stock. So maybe I live 5 miles away from a solar-powered house, but part of my electricity might be coming from their panel. And that's exciting, and that's something we want to see more of in the future.
Definitely.
Why solar panel versus other type of energy? Actually, different energy solutions have its advantage. So the advantage of solar panels is it's just very stable machine. There's no moving parts to solar. Like we said, there's no maintenance. It basically just sits on your roof and quietly produces power. It's silent, it's clean. Sometimes people say, well, why isn't there a wind decathlon instead of a solar decathlon? Wind energy is great. However, if you're living in a place without high wind velocities that occur frequently, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So for example, wind farms do really well offshore where there's a lot of constant wind speeds. They do really well on mountaintops. But here in central Jersey, it's not really too windy. So solar energy makes a lot more sense. And also, like we said, there's no moving parts. It's clean. It's silent. So it makes sense to have it in your residence. And it is safe. The only thing is, obviously, when it's installed, you'd want to have a certified contractor and electrician doing the work, because you still will be dealing with AC current and DC current if you're not using a microinverter.